Hi, I'm Gaia, and I want to tell you honestly why I'm making this video before I actually get into the video. I've always been someone who cares a lot about people, maybe someone who cares a little too much, specifically about people having access to things, because I know what it's like to not automatically have access because I'm a woman. There are entire parts of this world and parts of India, even, where being a woman means you don't get handed the same starting line in a marathon as everybody else. As a woman, you have to fight for being in a classroom, for an education, for a college degree, for the right to make your own financial decisions. Thankfully, I have never had to have those fights. It's not something I had to fight for, it's something I got naturally. But not every woman does. And that isn't something I take lightly at all. There's this poem that I really love by Maya Angelou. It's called The Caged Bird. In this poem, there's a bird in a cage with its wings clipped, its feet tied down. The only thing the bird can see through the cage is a tiny strip of sky through its bars. And every day, the bird just sings away. Every day. For a long time, I thought that this poem was such a sad little thing about this poor little bird. I don't think that anymore. I think the poem isn't about sadness, it's about defiance. It's about a caged bird that's not asking permission to want more. The caged bird is essentially saying, you can lock me up all you want, but you don't get to have the last word. I will sing regardless of how caged I am. I think that's what the bird says, and I think that's what the poem means. Right now, as I'm filming this, right this second, on 20th of July, 2026, there's a protest happening at Jantar Mantar in Delhi. Students, backed also by Sonam Wangchuk, who is a very well known educator and scientist. Sonam Wangchuk has been on a hunger strike since the end of June because the students and Sonam Wangchuk are demanding the resignation of India's current education minister over massive paper leaks in the NEET, that is the NEET exam, which is the entrance exam that decides who gets to be a doctor, a practicing medicine doctor in this country, in India. The problem is the exam papers got leaked and it therefore the exam was cancelled. Students were forced to take retests. And all of that chaos and pressure and certainty, the uncertainty that followed, caused more than a dozen students to take their own life. Kids who spent years of their lives preparing, who had dreams for themselves of, serving society as doctors, they were just gone like that, all because what looks like was complete political incompetence and carelessness. Now, let me talk about what I really want to talk about. I want to talk about freedom and liberation. What is freedom? Most people think that they know freedom and what it means, but honestly, most people have never had to define it. They've never had to fight for it. Like, freedom is just there, it's like oxygen or air, it's just there. The very, very famous economist and Nobel laureate Amartya Sen, he said that freedom isn't just a goal of life, but it's the fuel for a good life. So, what he meant was that you need a baseline or a foundational amount of freedom just to be able to get more of freedom, which means that freedom compounds. So, if you start with more freedom, you get more freedom, you're likely to be more free in the future because it compounds. But that also means if you have no freedom at all, you are going to be climbing up a hill that gets steeper and steeper the higher you go. It's going to be more than 100 times tough for you to have freedom if you've had none of it at all, ever. So let's break apart what freedom really is, because I think we tend to sort of just cram too many different things and types of freedom in one word, and that's not it. There's, first of all, geographical and political freedom, which is where you were born. Were you born somewhere where you can actually say something that you think without, disappearing for it? Then there's educational freedom, which is, do you actually have the access to learning, to information, to a classroom, to a library, a curriculum that isn't censored or controlled or taken away because of someone else's negligence or someone else's prejudice? Then there is gender and sexuality. Can you just live as who you are and love who you love, or do you have to hide it? Then there is financial freedom, which is not being, essentially not being just rich, but the freedom to have options, being able to leave a job that isn't working out for you anymore, it's crushing you, or being able to leave a relationship that isn't safe anymore, or are you actually just surviving through it? That's financial freedom. Then there is physical freedom, which is your body safe? Do you have agency over your body? Do you have agency over the things that you put in your body? Is your body actually yours to govern? Then there's emotional and mental freedom, I think, which I would categorize as, if you are carrying the shame or fear or trauma that isn't even yours, that someone handed to you before you could even say no to or consent to, your parents' trauma, their parents' trauma, is that what you're carrying? Then there is spiritual freedom, which is, can you believe what you want to believe or what you don't want to believe without a community, a society, a family, or a government deciding your belief for you? The thing is, if you notice, every single of part of the freedom categories that I just mentioned, all of them are external. So it's the stuff that the world gives you or can take away from you, which means you don't get to pick the country you're born in, you don't get to pick your body, you don't get to pick your family, your government until a certain age. And also, you don't get to pick whether you're born somewhere in a functioning school or in a functioning environment that is going to aid in your positive development. So, what it means is freedom is essentially circumstantial, freedom is just a matter of circumstance. The thing is, freedom is circumstance, but liberation is not. Liberation is what happens on the inside, regardless of what the outside hands to you. And what that means is, freedom gives you the access to liberation. The more freedom you have means the more access you have to, say, books, ideas, different people, knowledge, internet, travel. Freedom allows you to enter rooms that you want to go in. It creates opportunity. Freedom allows you to take up exams that you want to go to. Freedom is knowing if you're allowed to sit in a specific exam or not without someone else's negligence hanging over your head. So that is freedom. And what that does is, freedom makes access for knowledge. Access means more knowledge, and more knowledge is just the raw material for thinking. And thinking creates liberation. The actual uncomfortable, examined kind of thought is what liberation is made out of. Out of all the freedoms that I just listed, I think educational freedom is the most direct and the most important version of the whole thing, because it's so completely attached to everything. It's basically like the engine and foundation for the others. So, like, you can't gauge your own financial options if you were never taught how money works. You can't question the government censorship if you were never taught to think critically in the first place. You can't even know your own gender, sexuality, or anything around you. You can't know if you're being suppressed or if information is being withheld from you if you are just not taught how to understand it. So if you take away someone's education, and you don't just take away a subject in school, or like a, an aspect of their life. You take away When you take away education, you take away their ability to see that there is a life beyond the cage they're in. You take away their ability to see that they are standing in a cage to begin with. They think that's how the world is, that it's caged, but that's not the truth. And I want to say this because I feel very strongly about it, so please just bear with me. A degree does not mean knowledge. A degree means social status. That's it. A social status is all that a degree guarantees you. It's a piece of paper that tells the world you sat in XYZ amount of rooms for XYZ amount of years and passed XYZ amount of tests. It does not mean you actually learned how to think, how to question, how to see the cage you're standing in, and how to learn to get out of it. Plenty of people have a degree framed on their wall and they have never once used it in their life to liberate themselves or someone else. And let me tell you, when we talk about degrees, education is not free. It costs money, it costs years, it costs access that most people don't have, which is exactly why knowledge isn't free either. Not because knowledge itself has a price tag, but because the system that's supposed to hand it to you gatekeeps the knowledge behind money, behind status, behind exams that are leaked and stolen from people who need it the most. So when I say education is not a degree, I don't mean a degree is worthless. I mean the degree is absolutely nothing unless you take the knowledge underneath it and actually do something with it. Knowledge means nothing if you don't turn it into power. And if you don't use that power to liberate yourself and use it again and again to liberate those around you, it still means nothing. And that's the whole point. Education and a degree is not about just a certificate on a wall. What you do with what's behind it, the effort, the resource, that's what matters. So it's like this: freedom hands you the door, you know, but liberation is whether you actually walk through the door and then keep walking. And that's exactly, I think, what's being stolen from the students at Jantar Mantar right now. It's not just an exam date, it's the entire door itself. To sort of put it more into perspective for you, let me tell you something. Okay, think about this sentence: I am watching this on YouTube right now. You are watching this on YouTube right now, right? You've understood the sentence. You are watching this on YouTube right now. For you to be able to watch this on YouTube, you need uncensored access to the internet. You need a government that isn't actively blocking this digital application that is YouTube. You need a device in your hand, and you need enough safety in your day or night or wherever you are that you find time to sit for some time and listen to some random stranger on the internet talk about freedom. All of these things, there are people today, right now, at this second, for whom all of these things are completely not true. And oh, there's this, let me tell you about this. There's an inscription on the Statue of Liberty. It's a quote. I think it's a quote by Emma Lazarus. Yeah, give me a minute. I'll remember it. It's something about give me those, give, yeah, give me your, give me your tired ones, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free. Yes, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free. That's the quote by a poetess named Emma Lazarus um, that has been inscribed on the Statue of Liberty. And that quote does not mean give me the best of your soldiers. It means give me the tired people, the ones that have tried for a long time and are now very tired from trying. Because it says that freedom is not something you gain, it's something that is owed to people who keep trying again and again. Freedom is not something you earn, it's something that is owed. It's something inherently, it should be something inherently accessible. I'll also speak a little about Bhagat Singh to because there are so many stories in my head that I want to put together today in this video. So in 1930, roughly, imagine Bhagat Singh, Shaheed Bhagat Singh, 23 years old, a few days away from being executed for fighting for the freedom of his country. And he was sitting in a cell and he was writing. He was writing essays and he was not begging for his life in those essays. He was not um, sorry or pitiful of himself. He wrote about why he didn't believe in God, but more importantly, he wrote about why revolution is a standard, basic moral duty. And he um, took a phrase, Inqilab Zindabad, which was, I think, originally by this poet named Mohani, um, and he turned that phrase into something undeniable and impossible to forget. Inqilab Zindabad, which means long live the revolution. So Bhagat Singh took this one statement, Inqilab Zindabad, and turned it into this fierce war cry that he was willing to die shouting. And what baffles me is that he was fighting for a freedom he wouldn't get to live. He spent his life fighting for a freedom he will never see, because that means some of the freedom in your pocket right now, your vote, your voice, who you're allowed to love, your identity, your access to knowledge, to peace, to pleasure, and to leisure, was paid by someone who fought for it with their lives, and they traded their lives so that you could have this freedom today. But before we proceed, let me tell you something a little more about the Iron Lady of Manipur, Irom Sharmila Chanu. Not a lot of people outside India know about her. So, Irom Sharmila Chanu, the Iron Lady of Manipur, in the year 2000, she went on a hunger strike after soldiers shot about 10 civilians dead on a bus stop. And she went on that hunger strike demanding repeal for um, this injustice from the law. She wanted to know what gave military that kind of impunity and that right to just destroy lives like that. That hunger strike ended in 2016. She fasted for 16 years. So, because the Indian law treats suicide as a crime, the state offered her arrest almost immediately, and for 16 years she was kept in like like a jail arrest, like a hospital room arrest, and she was force fed through a tube in her nose, and she was released once the maximum sentence got out, and then she was arrested again after a few days, just when she would pull the tube out of her nose, and she would resume fasting. And so this continued for 16 years. She would fast, she got arrested, she was put into the hospital. Once the sentence was over, she would fast again. Then she was again taken into custody. In 2016, she broke the fast, and what she said was that she wanted real power because asking nicely for 16 years hadn't been enough. The thing is, she started to fast in 2000 with no social media, no YouTube, no Twitter, no viral hashtag campaigns, because of which there was no way for her story to travel outside the state of Manipur or outside the hospital room in Imphal, except for, you know, except through a few journalists who chose to cover her story. And she did that for 16 years, very, very unseen from most of the world and almost with no access to share it with anybody. And that makes me think that we take the access we have today for granted, because Sonam Wangchuk's hunger strike today gets covered live. It gets clipped and it gets shared within hours. It gets the nation's attention within few days. And it's because of all the resources. It's because of all these accessible applications that we have. It's almost as if Irom Sharmila walked so Sonam Wangchuk could run. But it's not because like his cause matters more than the others. It's because the access has finally caught up to the people like her who have already been doing these things in silence. And that's why I talked about why Freedom gives you access, and access is what makes liberation possible. She had almost no access, and she still didn't stop. I can't even begin to imagine what she could have done with what we have right now if it was happening right now. Um, Let me go back to Inqilab Zindabad for you. Um, Inqilab Zindabad isn't just about revolution. It's about progress. It's about right. It's about reclaiming agency over yourself and your brain and your awareness and yourself as an individual. And I don't think it began as Inqilab Zindabad. It started as so many different things. Um, and it started in jail, but it also started in a classroom, you know, in classrooms like the classrooms led by Savitribai Phule and Jyotiba Phule. Let me tell you, today, as a woman in India, I can sit here, educated, financially independent, saying whatever I want to say on the camera because of Savitribai Phule. So I think in 1948, a 9-year-old girl who had been married off years before she even turned 9, that was Savitribai Phule, she sat down in a classroom in Pune and opened India's first school for girls, along with her husband, Jyotira Phule or Jyotiba Phule. She learned to read and write by herself, sort of in secret, because at that point there was nobody in the world who believed that women were supposed to be teachers, that women deserved an education. And she would walk to the school every single day to teach other girls. People threw stones at her, they threw cow dung at her. Savitribai Phule used to carry an extra sari in her bag because she knew she'll have to change into a clean sari when she goes to school, when she reaches the school, because on her way to the school, it would be covered in cow dung that people threw at her. Every single day she did this, every single day. And it's beyond, I don't even know how I can express my gratitude. And mm, it's baffling, and it just, I'm speechless. It renders me speechless. The amount of things people have been through so for us to be here today. And that's just one part of it. Then Jyotiba Phule or Jyotirao Phule, her husband, he didn't just support her on the sidelines. He also fought for caste oppression his whole life. He opened schools for girls with lower castes. He opened up resources and communities for people who were sort of the nobodies. The society thought they were nobodies and they didn't deserve to have resources. And he built something called Satya Shodhak Samaj, which means truth seeker society, to challenge the entire social order, um, that believed that some people simply weren't allowed to know things, which is even today still valid, unfortunately. I want you to know, if you are a woman watching, I'm able to sit here and talk to you right now because of these two people and so many others over so many years, because they decided a girl's mind was worth getting hit and worth taking cow dung for. And that's not an abstract idea or an abstract debt. It's a literal physical price that two people paid, and countless others did as well, for the freedom I have as a woman and for the freedom you have as a person to seek a certain kind of education. It's the price that they paid for you and me to be free, to earn our own money, to be educated, to build our own lives on our rules, based on our perspectives and our norms. This is slightly tangential, but let me say this. I want to say something so that I can get across that this video is not just about women or for women, it's for everybody. And let me touch upon patriarchy for a bit. Patriarchy doesn't just take away from women, it takes away from men as well, but just in completely opposite ways. Patriarchy gives women too much responsibility too early and calls it womanhood, and patriarchy hands men too much power too early and calls it manhood. Both of those things rob people, children, of their childhoods in two opposite directions. So the thing is, women are taught to always be responsible, but a lot of men are always taught to, you know, not be afraid, not cry, and they're not allowed to need anybody. And that's apparently called strength. And that's not strength. It's just a kid being told that their own feelings are a liability because they are not allowed to cry, they're not allowed to need help, they're not allowed to feel what they want to feel. And what this produces over and over is grown men who have absolutely no idea how to be gentle with themselves. Men who can learn to pour empathy into somebody else, but when it comes to themselves, they have no empathy for themselves at all because they've been taught to not ask for it. They've been taught that having empathy for yourself is a disgrace. That's not a small price to pay. It's someone's decades of inner life. It's someone's entire lives in a monologue that is just gone because the system needs a man to perform strength instead of actually feeling anything. And that's just one part of it. When it comes to women, it's so much more different. It's so much of the woman being constantly held responsible for the actions of everyone else and her own when that should never be the case. And I don't mean women getting freedom from patriarchy when I talk about liberation. I talk about everyone gaining freedom when I talk about liberation. I it's about a world Liberation is about a world with real gender liberation. A world with real gender liberation isn't one where women take power away from men. It's a world where nobody has to perform a version of themselves that costs them their own sanity and their own humanity. Just the way Savitribai Phule fought for girls to be educated, and a man's learning is also okay to cry, those two aren't two different fights. Savitribai Phule started fighting for girls to be educated, but also for a man to learn that it's okay to cry. And those two really aren't different fights. Those are the same fights in two completely different directions. I just wanted to touch upon that. Now, getting back to what I want to talk about. Why patriarchy ties into all of this about education and everything that's happening is because power that nobody's watching always ends up costing somebody else's entire life. And there's this very famous quote that I'm 100% sure everyone's heard. It's that power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. That is exactly what is happening. That means when there's too much power, accountability disappears. When there's no consequence for a paper leak, no consequence for a broken exam system, the people at the top just failing and failing upward and onward, while the kids underneath them pay for it with years of their lives, or in worst case, in this scenarios, with their actual lives. And it's not a small decision that is made, it's a collective decision. When we talk about absolute power corrupts absolutely, it's never a standalone decision, it's a collective decision made by a group of people. In this case, it is voting. Your vote is not a symbolic gesture. It is not something you do to feel a good citizen and then just forget about it. The people you put in power or fail to put in power make the decisions that reach into a child's bedroom, a teenager's bedroom in some city you've never visited, in the bedroom of a teenager you have never known. and determine whether that child will live or die over an exam. That's not dramatic. It's literally what is happening right now. That is exactly what happened right now and has been happening for a while now, right? One vote. That's genuinely how close some elections are decided by. That's how small the margin is of the handful of people staying at home who will change everything. So don't believe stuff like, oh, it's just a vote, it doesn't matter. Of course, your vote matters. This is why your vote matters. This is why you should vote. And if you don't believe that, if you don't think your vote matters, and if you don't think it's that serious, it's that deep, try telling that to a parent who's now planning their child's funeral instead of planning their child's graduation. Okay? Now that we've talked about freedom, let's actually talk about liberation and how to access it and what to do with it. First of all, freedom and liberation are not the same thing. They don't mean the same things, and they're not the same words. They're not synonyms at all. Freedom is something you can inherit, liberation is something you have to take or you have to build by thought, overthought, from the inside out. Nobody hands liberation to you. Inqilab Zindabad is not waiting to demand the revolution. Bhagat Singh didn't wait for the empire to feel generous for its freedom, to give freedom to the people of India. Savitribai Phule didn't wait for permission to teach. And remember what I said earlier, freedom gives you access, access gives you knowledge, and knowledge in raw form is thought, and thought, real, uncomfortable, examined thought, is what produces liberation. Freedom without thought is just comfort. It's a cage with a pretty wallpaper. That's what it is. Liberation only happens when you take the access you've been granted, when you take the access you have, and you actually use it to question stuff, to rebuild yourself from the inside out. Let's talk about the types of liberation now, just as we talked about the types of freedom. Emotional freedom costs you comfort of going to therapy and finding out the story you've told yourself or the story that's been told to you about your entire childhood is probably a lie. For men specifically, um, emotional liberation means unlearning what masculinity um, means or unlearning a lot of emotional and societal behaviors. For women, it means not being everyone's mom all the time. For women, it means taking responsibility for your own emotions rather than taking it for someone else's. And that's probably a really hard thing, but perhaps one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Educational liberation costs you a certain amount of certainty as well, but in a different way. It means actually using the access you have or the one that you were given instead of just sitting on it. Educational liberation is reading a book that nobody assigned you. It's asking questions that make you look uninformed in a room, but asking it anyway to educate yourself. Educational liberation is the one freedom that once you have it, nobody can force feed you the way they did to Idom Sharmila or take away from you the way they did with a leaked exam. All of that happens only if you use the education liberation instead of just holding on to it. Then there's physical liberation. This can cost you your safety in the short term to get to the long term, your agency over your body. That is physical liberation. Financial liberation costs you a lot. It costs you the approval of people who benefit from you staying dependent on them. And spiritual liberation also costs you certainty, the certainty of believing something or not believing something. And the most important, civic liberation, the kind that's happening right now with those students at Jantar Mantar that are fighting right now costs you comfort as well. It's the comfort of not knowing if you're going to come home in one piece because of all the rioting. But people doing it anyway. So instead of asking yourself, am I free? Can you ask yourself, what am I actually doing with the freedom I already have? Am I thinking with it, or am I just living comfortably inside of it? And if you want to check that, we have a system for that as well. So, how you check it is you go category wise: geography, gender, finance, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, educational. And you ask yourself, if I lost XYZ type of freedom tomorrow, would it break me, or would it just kind of like be annoying? Would it just suck? Could I, if I lost this XYZ freedom today, could I say that I can actually live without it? Or would it just be sort of an inconvenience? Could I say what I want to actually say out loud without a real risk? Could I love who I want to love in public without a real risk of dying, a real risk of life altering problems? And if your answer is it'll just be annoying, then that's not freedom. That's something much more. That's privilege. And privilege is not something you should feel bad for, but it's something you should spend. And it's something you should spend well, something you should spend right. Don't ever try to save people. Don't try to talk over them. Don't mentor them out of pity. Give them the opportunity, the resource, the time instead of your opinion. Use whatever platform you have to amplify the voices of those who aren't heard. Show up consistently for the people who are fighting for freedoms that you were simply born with. Vote like it's the only tool you have, because for most of us, that kind of is. And the whole thing, that's all you have to do, honestly. You have to notice what you have, stop apologizing for it, and turn it into access to help someone else. Turn your access into knowledge, your knowledge into thought, and your thought into something that frees someone besides yourself. Toni Morrison said this, and I love this quote. She said, "The function of freedom is to free someone else." The function of freedom is to free someone else. That's your assignment. That's all you have to do. Now, let's go back to the caged bird one last time. This caged bird sings about freedom because singing is the only freedom it has left. It's reaching for something it can't even see, let alone touch. But that's not nothing, is it? That's kind of its own kind of miracle. But it's still limited to just a song. And the bird can't open its cage. It can't open someone else's cage either. Now, in the poem, there's another bird, one that actually gets to fly. The bird that isn't just singing about freedom, but it can go somewhere with it. It can carry the seed across continents. A flying free bird that can choose the kind of worms it wants to eat. A bird that can lead another bird out of a smaller cage. The Freebird song isn't a prayer, it's an invitation. For most of you watching this video right now, very, very thankfully, you are not the caged bird. You are the one that already flies, which is amazing news. So tell me, if you're the bird that flies free, who are you going to sing for? Before I end this video, I want to say one more thing about Inqilab Zindabad, because I don't think it only means what we've been talking about the entire video. Revolution doesn't just mean um, about an empire or a government or a courtroom. You can revolt against a system, an institution, a community, a group of ideas, a person that isn't helping you grow anymore. That revolution is just as real as the ones we talked about today. And sometimes the thing you have to revolt against is yourself. Not who you are, but who you used to be. The version of you that made sense once, that kept you safe once, that now you've outgrown and are still dragging around out of habit. That version of you doesn't get a vote in the person that you become next. You're allowed to declare Inqilab Zindabad against your own old self. Long live the revolution. You have every right to start, even if the empire you're overthrowing is just an old, tired version of you. You already know which bird you are by now. So, the only question I want to ask you after all that I've told you and after all that I've said to you is, what are you going to do with your access? Has it turned into thought? Has the thought turned into liberation? Your own liberation or someone else's? And if it hasn't, what are you going to do about it?